Thank you for dropping by. I am Alec, the Director of Broadcasting at One True Promotion.
And I'm Andrew Bass, Chief Operating Officer.
I'm Nicholas Georgiel, the Arts and Media Director at One True Promotion.
And you are watching Drop a Line from 8 to 9. We are very excited tonight to have a science fiction books chat with the amazing A.R. Mirabal. Let's all give him a warm welcome. And here is the man of the hour, AR. How are you this evening?
I am great. I love that little intro, the whole thing. I even like the gang doing the sign off at the beginning. I thought you were gonna tag me. I was gonna be like AR, and I'm AR. Ding ding ding. Do a little song and dance.
Yeah, no, we do a special thing for the guest. It's so good to have you here. Andrew is the technician who discovered StreamYard and brought Drop a Line to the next level, and Nicholas Georgiel is the amazing artist and videographer who gave us that lovely intro to One True Promotion, which played at the beginning. So the whole team is here to make Drop a Line a better experience for you. But anyway, AR, tonight is your night. So my first question really is, I would love it if some of our new viewers could hear a little bit about you. What were your favorite books growing up, and why were they your favorites?
You know what's weird? I get that question asked so often that sometimes it makes me kind of like, you give like the automatic response of like, oh, I loved, the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, which is not a lie. I do love that book, and it definitely shaped a lot of my like logic. But the things that really hit me, honestly, were short stories, like The Egg by, I believe, Andy Weir, which was kind of like a short story about a person that dies and meets God, and they just have a conversation with God about life, eternity, what the point of it all is, what the universe is, the nature of everything. And I think that is actually more often than not, those 1,500 words of that short story has a bigger effect on my writing than just about everything else that I've ever read, really.
That's amazing. And I like how you point out that some of our biggest inspiration can come from the most unexpected places, right?
Yeah, definitely. Especially that just recently I was in London visiting some friends, and someone on a drunken night popped out a YouTube video, which was just a video representation of that short story, which I hadn't read in 10, 15 years. So it was just one of those things that, like, wow, the story is still following me. It still has this effect on me. It still has this grasp.
Absolutely. That's awesome, AR. I'd really love to hear tonight about you and about the book that you wrote. And I know that you happen to be a science fiction author. So this is kind of a loaded question, but I'd love to know what your favorite genre is and how has that genre informed your writing process?
Well, I guess the answer is going to be a little obvious. It's science fiction. And, I can give back with a loaded question. It's something that I've been like thinking about like so often. Science fiction, just how it attacks certain like existential like ideas of humanity, like what technology does to the humans, what it can do to our future, what that means for everything, even the idea of God and all those things. I think that sci-fi grasps those ideas while also going into almost like a magical sense of technology, whereas like you start off with how you want things to go and then start logicking how that's actually possible within like a normal confine. Then you start like, sharpening it down so it's like at least a little bit realistic, but at the end of the day, it's still far off technology. Asimov wrote about people that were surfing on the sun. Nothing that I know about science can justify that right now. But who knows? That's the whole beauty of like science fiction. It's that like it has such an effect on the actual science that comes out. You know, how many YouTube videos do you see now of like YouTube engineers that make lightsabers or that make like real versions of like, you know, neutron blasters or like lasers or whatever. It's all based on the sci-fi like that they were interested in when they were younger, and it's been perpetual since, you know, the start of the genre, if you ask me.
Let me put you guys all on the hot seat. In terms of sci-fi, what's one sci-fi series that you could absolutely not live without? I'll go first.
Oh, that's a good
The
one.
Alien series. Big surprise.
I just became a fan of that, man. I'm not kidding. I just marathoned them this week. I am a huge fan. Huge thumb up for that one. I love that series. It's unbelievable.
How about you, Nick?
Well, Alien's a good choice, Andrew. I definitely love the first movie a lot. I'm gonna throw out something weird, and that is something I got into more recently, but I love a lot of classic anime, and I've really come to like the works of Leiji Matsumoto, the manga author. He's a manga author from the 70s, and there's a few movies and a series that I've been watching. It's called Galaxy Express 999, and it's about space trains. It's about this boy who's trying to his mother is killed. He lives on some planet. His mother is killed by robots. So he wants to get a robot body so he can kill the robots who killed his parents. And he travels with this very mysterious woman who kind of guides him along on this journey on space trains. And they travel from planet to planet, and they kind of encounter different villains. So, yeah, that's one that stuck out with me that has really started shaping how I look at sci-fi. And how
that sounds awesome.
How about you, Aaron?
Honestly, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Adam Douglas. Knockout. Unbelievable. I've never seen... There are certain things that still stick with me, just like almost social commentary. There's in the first, I think, 5 pages of the book, there's like a line that he's referring to Earth from like an alien perspective, kind of like talking about the absurdities of everything. And he says like humans are so obsessed with like the consumption and generation of papers with green faces on it, but they never stop to wonder that the faces were never smiling. Like, it's one of those things that it just sticks with you. And like it's one of those things that at first it makes you laugh, but then like, you know, you start kind of thinking on it. It's like, oh God. And you keep on reading it, and the book is filled with little things like that. Just awesome things that just make your mind explore like, oh man, what is the possibility of that? There's a thing called an impossibility drive, which instead of working by like, you know, jets or whatever it is, it literally calculates every placement of atoms in the entire universe and then just goes in between them randomly until it gets to the place that you want.
Yeah. Ooh, man, those are some great answers, guys. I'm gonna have to be boring and say Star Wars, which some would contest it even is science fiction as opposed to a space opera, just an opera, fantasy opera that takes place in space. But the reason I say Star Wars, for whatever science fiction-y elements it contains, is that, like it or not, it's like that thing I can't get away from. No matter how much I try to go into fantasy, anime, drama, Breaking Bad, whatever. No matter what, Star Wars just keeps coming back because it's in part because it's such a cash cow, and in part because it's, you know, regarded as such a classic. It's had way too big a presence in my creativity as a writer for me not to give it that nod. Like, I'm constantly, if I think about something, I'm constantly thinking back to, even if it's just like a passing thought in regards to a character arc. I think about Star Wars way too many times in one day to even fathom what kind of artist I would be if I'd never seen it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And honestly, runner-up to Dune by Frank Herbert. And I became a fan posthumously after like the Dune movie and, you know, with Timmy Charcuterie, whatever his name is. But that is another series that is just insane with like the scale and how everything is like a cross and just like, I'm a sucker for like when they actually explain technology in like a way that you can like wrap around your head and be like, okay, now I get how this works and what this can do and how this can manipulate the environment that it's in. I love things like that, honestly.
Yeah, I'm curious. When you say the Dune movie, do you mean the newest one or the one with Dwayne Johnson in it?
No, that's Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, there's actually
Dwayne Johnson?
Doom out there where Dwayne Johnson is a part of the cast. It's also one of the guys from The Boys. I can't think of his name right now.
I don't know of that one.
Well, I thought there were only two, like the new one with like Zendaya, and then the one with the guy from Twin Peaks, which was like
David Lynch
David
directed the original
David
one,
Lynch. Yeah. I didn't know there was one with Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, it wasn't
I
that
love
bad.
that one.
It wasn't his best movie, but it wasn't that bad.
I actually gotta check that out now because
Same here.
I went to like an open air movie theater and they were playing Dune and everyone there thought it was a new Dune and it was the old one and everyone was disappointed. That movie is very different than the new one, honestly.
Well, at least you have two. At least you have two to choose from now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, Doom is a really awesome sci-fi
phenomenal.
series.
Yeah, it's unreal.
I mean, being based off of the games and whatnot.
No,
Actually-
he's talking about Dune, not Doom.
I thought he said Doom.
No.
Oh, now I get. I'm like Dwayne Johnson. That's crazy. I thought he was doing Black Adam.
Yeah.
When did he have time for that? After Fast and Furious? That doesn't make sense.
How can we
maybe
not
talking
know
about
something?
Barry.
That was like way early in his career. Like that was one of his like. I guess it was right around the time that he did, I think, Scorpion King.
Oh god,
Oh,
that
yeah.
CGI mess. Yeah. The anniversary of that was like. No, go ahead.
I'm going to address this one to the whole panel. You can finish what you were saying. But my next question was going to be, if you could be the author of one popular book, what book would you choose? And I'll address it to all three of you.
Well, I'll choose Harry Potter just because I like money. So I would like to get some of that Harry Potter money for sure. I was just talking about this. I have a friend that has like, a 12-year-old cousin or brother, whatever, and they just started reading it. And I'm over here like, wait a minute. These books came out how long ago and it's still getting new readers? The luxury. Can you imagine?
Exactly. How about you, Andrew?
I mean, do you really have to ask?
I
I think all of you could guess what I was
Dude,
saying. Lord of the Rings. One
Yeah,
hands.
that's the
I
one.
would live
that's a good
forever.
one too, though. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Well, I guess I'll pick something different. Probably Mobile Suit Gundam, because
good one.
that just has endless adaptations that literally kind of like Transformers. That'll just go forever and ever and ever. And it kind of has. I mean, I love the original Mobile Suit Gundam movies and series, but there's so much of it that I'd just be. Yeah, same thing. It's like, how much money do I make here? Because
Yeah.
if it's popular, I want to make the dough.
Yeah, exactly.
These are great answers, guys. If I could be the author of any two other books, I think those books would be Sanguinary Song and The Death of Earth, which I would love to hear about now.
You go first, Andrew.
Okay, so the Sanguinary Song is a supernatural first in the Sanguinary series of magical YA novels. It follows a young girl named Christina who discovers that she is a witch, and she basically has to struggle with understanding what that means, and all while trying to avoid a darkness that's been chasing her.
So, Life is Death, The Death of Earth. A Japanese high school student named Daichi is visited by the Shadow Man, a mysterious entity who turns him into a death. And a death must kill 1,000 people per month. If they do this, they remain immortal and can live forever and do not age. But if they do not meet this quota, they will die if they do not kill 1,000 people a month. However, Daichi finds out... So a death is given a power in order to do this, to achieve their kills. So Daichi is given Earth, so he can create earthquakes, for example. However, there are 3 other deaths in this series who he'll run into. There's the death of wind, fire, and water. And Daichi will have to figure out his way along a very chaotic and death-filled journey.
Whew. Those are some good plugs.
Yeah.
Those are
That's
some
awesome. And I love that cover. My God.
Thank you. Yep. I did not do it, but it is a good cover.
This has been a great interview so far, but I definitely think, AR, that we definitely want to dig more under your skin a little tiny bit for our interested viewers. So, Nick, do you have any questions for Mr. Mirabal?
Yes, AR, can you please tell us about your works and especially your writing process?
Well, as far as my works, Allegory of the End is the first in the Death of Order series, saga, however you want to call it. And the very first book is based around Zako and Jid. Now, it starts off very almost 80s movie feel where it's just like following their life, but slowly things start ramping up. And I did that specifically as far as like process goes, because this is a very world building heavy book. Not only is it in a far off future with different technology, they're on a different planet, and humanity as we know it has changed significantly, almost to the point of not being recognizable. So I kind of used those couple chapters to ease you in, and then also to introduce these two characters, because the whole thing is that the book is split between the characters being young and the characters being old. So when they're young, they become best friends. They, unravel this huge conspiracy about the government and the world at large. Truths are revealed, XYZ, and they continue on from there. When they're older, they're now at the respective heads of their communities. Zako is the literal president of the world, and Jid is now a rebel leader with like 5,000 people, barely, like being able to do anything that he wants, or just being in his military, just supporters all together. So now they're getting complete beef with one another. They have problems. They're at war with one another. If you can really call that a war, it's 5,000 versus like 50 million soldiers. It's not a war at all. It's a little scrimmage, if anything. So that whole thing and how it builds up is great, because you have, when they're older, you have Zako with this immense level of power, kind of like the classic sci-fi archetype of like, the crazy, like, Tyrell Industries from Blade Runner. And then you have Jid on the other side with kind of being the, underdog, going about it, and just that pressure of knowing that you are just, there's no way you can win this, but there's no way you can lose either. And you have that going on with like that going back and forth between them being friends and then being at war. And the whole idea is like, what happened in this time gap to create such animosity between these two? And then as the series progresses, it kind of like goes on. And like you kind of understand more things, and other characters get brought in, because I definitely was very inspired by Marvel, and like the idea that each random character that passes in a movie could have like a whole other movie in a couple years, because the universe is an actual universe and things like always happen. So the side characters in every book are not side characters. Almost all of them have their own books like lined up within the saga, and they all just explain things more and more and more until this, cosmic entity is finally revealed, and all the craziness that happens that.
Yeah, AR, it definitely sounds like you have a lot to work with there. I'm glad you brought up Blade Runner. I should have thrown that out earlier. That's probably my favorite sci-fi movie, if I had to pick. And it's interesting how Tyrell influenced one of your characters there. Yeah, I think it's a good sign, AR, when you have characters where you feel like, oh, I could branch off and do all this, because I've been feeling that in my series too, The Death of Earth that I'm working on, and it gives you a lot to work with, right?
Yeah. Well, I just love the idea that specifically the whole thing that inspired me as far as like true like emotional inspiration. I've always felt like it was something that was like real. Like I remember when the idea of Allegory of the End started gestating in my mind, I had just gone through like a situation with my best friend since I was like in middle school. We went to college, and the moment we moved in with one another as roommates, which you thought would be the ideal situation, right? Middle school friends finally getting together for college. We ended up hating each other within a couple short months immediately, because it was just like the understanding that like we were friends then, but like the type of people that we matured into weren't the same type of people that we wanted to be as adults, and like there were just conflicts between that. And that inspiration in itself is what led into all these different things, because it gave me the idea that perspective really is everything. Like you could have this whole argument with a person, and then a third person comes in and here's one side and here's the other side, and depending on who said the side better, they're going to go with. Not even that it's universally right, but just because perception is how it is. If I do something to you, in your point of view, it could be that I was just being, mean, I was being an a-hole that day, And somebody else, from my point of view, was like, I got my foot shot off. I like stubbed my toe 4 times. I like, a can of paint fell on me, an anvil fell on my toe, just like cartoon stuff. And then by the time I got to you, that was like the best I could do. It's all perspective. So I love that in, for example, Allegory of the End, you hear what you read of, certain events happen in one certain way, and you interpret it as that is law. And then as other books come out and you get the other point of view, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Now what do I believe?
Interesting. So let me ask you, how is this rebooted series going to be different from others in its genre?
Well, as far as difference in the genre, I guess the idea of like art is always copied from one another. For even as revolution as Star Wars was, I actually read a phenomenal article that literally pointed out all the different like books that were like that sci-fi books that had come out in like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s that actually influenced Star Wars. Like even the idea of a lightsaber came from this book in like the 1940s, where that's what people were doing. They were doing like martial arts with like blades made of light in just like different ways. So like the best I can do to change the genre is, I guess, have representation from my end. Growing up, I guess I wasn't really paying attention to it, but all the genres I read about were all about white people or just a certain type of thing. Whereas like now that I have the ability, I can represent my own culture. I'm Dominican, I can represent other cultures and like kind of like put them in the same sci-fi that we've ever seen. Wakanda was honestly one of the first times that I've seen a future African American society in like pop culture. Things like that is, I think, the best you can do. Just keep on changing, add like your own point of view, add my perspective of life onto the books that I write, and then twist it in with stuff that I find really interesting and weird.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to have a good variety of characters. People come from different places and bring their own perspectives and stuff. So yeah, it definitely sounds like you're shaping up your story to be really well rounded there. So do you expect any challenges when you're promoting your book?
I mean, promoting is the challenge right there. That's the challenge. Yeah. Promoting is so annoying. I agree. It always feels like it's a crapshoot. There are times that I've spent, no exaggeration, weeks on a promotion that got like, a couple trickles. Another time that I just like, like half asleep at like 7 a.m. Oh, let me just try to post it early, and that one for whatever reason like pops and blows up and gets like thousands of likes and views or whatever on Instagram. And even like just the boost on Amazon when you go and like check, it's like, oh, like how are my sales doing per month based on what I was doing that month as far as promotion, and even that is all over the place. I mean, it's so hard to like really narrow it down and see like what is working and what is not. But I think just as everything goes, like you just feel the things that you like doing the most, and then those kind of go. Because I, for example, know like especially with just like everything I do on my podcast, I love that I, spoke with some of these people a year and a half ago, and now I look at what they're doing now, and it's like, oh, okay. And that one little aspect that they did maybe a couple videos of in the past, now that's like their bread and butter, and they're getting a whole bunch of new people join their channel because of those. So I guess when I just find the thing that I actually really like doing outside of the podcast, obviously, then everything will just kind of go together.
Yeah, it's a real hustle, right? With promoting, I found the same thing, but I think we've all been trying to find ways to, make it interactive or fun, and I know Andrew's had a lot of success with that kind of interactive stuff with his characters when he was promoting a Sanguinary Song. But yeah, it's a hustle, man. But we go along. So let me wrap this my questions up by asking, what's something we should be excited about, AR?
Life, waking up tomorrow. Honestly, my next book. Honestly, my next book, I actually changed up into order. I was so obsessed with the idea of expanded universe that I was actually going to drop Iris of Mercy, which is actually the book from the point of view of two of the side characters from Allegory of the End. That was going to be my second book, and then I was going to drop Allegory of the End Part 2 or Volume 2 as the third book. But I've kind of rehashed that idea, and I'm just going to drop it as Allegory of the End Part 1, which is already out. and then part 2 is going to be coming out in a couple of months. I would say 5 to 7. It's going to take a little bit more work as far as just like the editing and getting like all the things. As I'm sure everyone here knows, it's the real like, you know, couple months of like that hard grinding, you know, making sure all the formatting is right, the book formatting, all the, you know, random fonts, exactly. All those things are like the real fine tuning and making sure to do that on top of everything else happening in life. But that is coming soon. Definitely keep an eye out for that. And honestly, just Neotino, the company, is always working on things. We do covers, we do bookmarks, we do live trailers now for books, and we're just always getting a new idea, a new like type of genre to like make a new cover about, a new thing about, and we also have merch coming out, I believe, in October.
Well, you sound stacked. Good luck with that, and we'll be looking forward to it.
And I actually do have I'm a co-author in Collective Visions, which is a sci-fi anthology, and I think that's coming out in a couple months too. Like they've been doing a whole bunch of promo. Shout out to those Collective Tales Publishing, awesome people over there.
Very good.
AR, I have a question. I can tell, we can tell, if I could speak for the group, just talking to you, that you are a very stimulated, active, creative person. I'm curious what makes you focus on one project versus another.
Well, I definitely have intense levels of ADHD, but I feel like the only thing that like actually keeps like focus is just like that weird obsession. People always think that ADHD just means that you're always like scatterbrained, but really it just means that you don't have a gauge on attention. So like it means that when you obsess about something, you obsess. It's like every idea when you wake up, when you're out at a bar, you might having fun, but your mind just trails off back to it. So really, I gauge my work based on the things that actually give me that feeling. If I start writing something and I don't have that immediate like, I just naturally kind of drop it. But when something like hits, I mean, I run with it. I go with the energy because it feels right.
That's awesome. And what's something about Allegory of the End and the sequel book that just makes you feel real good? Something we haven't gone over yet.
Real good as in like the reader's interpretation, or real good as like me as the author?
Real good as in, ooh, I got to drop everything and I got to get right in this.
I would say my favorite part about it is just the idea that I actually did bring in. I mean, all that emotional and like, you know, philosophical stuff that I put in. It's actually why I always like think that it's like funny when you ask authors what their book is about. Because if you ask what my book is about, I'll give you all this emotional backlog that has like almost nothing to do. But in reality, the book is like a stock sci-fi. There are aliens, a Frankenstein alien that's like an amalgamation of this being that had basically like an Area 51 type of situation where an alien had like, you know, come down on the planet. Thousands of years later, they dig this thing up, experiment on it, and then we make it into this Frankenstein-esque type of like thing that's just rampaging and doing XYZ. I mean, it has all those elements. It has people like, you know, fighting with like, you know, technological enhanced swords and weaponry and doing all these type of things. I would say the thing that you definitely got to pick up the book for is simply just the geopolitical tension between Zako and Jid, which is intense, and the fight scenes, honestly. I mean, they're at war.
You are a good salesman. Can I tell you that?
Well, thank you. I actually wasn't saying it before doing this.
You know, but I mean, seriously, I am the kind of person who looks at his to-be-read list and gets a little lost. I look at books I want to buy and I don't buy or do buy because I'm kind of just juggling what I'm going to read and what I'm not going to read. But as I sit here talking to you, I'm kind of getting pulled towards putting your book at the top of my to-be-read list. I mean, that's just how you sell it.
Well, anyone listening, I wouldn't mind if you had that same idea, you know? Maybe sit behind a light bulb and turn it on and be like, oh wait a minute, I should get that book.
Absolutely. What do you think makes science fiction so much of a popular genre? If you had to boil it down to one or two aspects.
I would say the thing about sci-fi that makes it so popular is really that the genre can be flipped around into absolutely anything. Like, for example, I always say that Star Wars is like one of those IPs that makes you want to just like bite your fist, because if you think about it, absolutely everything on the planet can fit within Star Wars. You can retool Stranger Things by a couple little plot points, and it could fit within the Star Wars universe. 11 is force sensitive. Hawkins is Sith people trying to hunt her down. Boom. Everything else is explained, and like the whole thing with like the Upside Down, that could be like, you know, Sith influence, whatever you want. I mean, it encompasses everything, and to me, sci-fi is like that. I've seen sci-fi romance movies that hit my, you know, heartstrings just as well as just a stock romance movie, but it also had, you know, the whole existential crisis of being in space. You know, Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, just movies like that. Yeah, Her, right, with Scarlett Johansson playing playing the cell phone, and Joaquin Phoenix playing like the guy that's obsessed with the cell phone. Just things like that are just, I think that's why sci-fi is great, because it can encompass anything. It can, whatever it is that your specific little niche is. My friends are not sci-fi fans whatsoever, which is kind of weird, but they're not. But they do have their movies that they like a lot that just happen to be sci-fi, but they wouldn't claim it as that. You understand what I'm saying? It's just, I think that's why sci-fi is awesome.
That is such a great answer. Thank you for answering that question. And it's so true. It's given me a lot to think about in terms of how I approach the genre, even if I wanted to try writing a sci-fi piece. You bring up such a great point about how it can so easily, you know, be revitalized into anything. I would love to take an opportunity here to talk about a thriller book that I think qualifies as a sci-fi book. Barker's Rules is about a superhuman serial killer who kidnaps a girl named Melanie. Melanie is a 16-year-old girl from Fargo, North Dakota, who is thrust into a fight for survival in the house of Justin Barker, leaving mundane life and going straight into a dangerous world ruled by the Meridian Killers. Melanie has 3 chances to break Barker's rules, and this could be the end of her, or it could be her way to freedom. You'll have to read and find out for yourself. AR, would you like to do a book plug?
Sure. Well, AR Mirabal, author of Allegory of the End. I would definitely go ahead and want to plug that. Allegory of the End, Volume 1. It's out now. Go ahead and pick it up. If you go to neotino.net, not only will you see the book and you can just get it directly from me, it's also on Amazon and any other place that you want to pick it up. But you can also just get free short stories that are within the universe of Allegory of the End too. You can read a short story from the point of view of that Frankenstein alien monster that I said, because as I said, it's all about point of view. Obviously, in Allegory of the End, that's the bad guy. That's like Boo from Dragon Ball Z. But when you understand its point of view and how that came to be, I think you would draw a little bit more sympathy for like what's happening. And then the book itself, you know, it has aliens. I mean, it has crazy historical conspiracy theories, bringing everything together. They might not be how I always wanted to kind of like grasp it, is that at first book, Volume 1 is all centered around the planet, and then the second book expands it into other ones. You know, in Volume 2, the one that I'm finalizing right now, you visit other planets, you talk to other species, you understand why it is that it seemed that it's taken so long for us to communicate with other life form, like Fabernucci's principle. The whole idea is, like, you know, are we actually alone? All those ideas, all those principles, even the Mandela effect of, like, you know, time disparity. I wrap all those things into it. I love conspiracy theories, not because I actually follow them, but just because they're a great inspiration, honestly. So I try to like shoehorn as much as I can in there, just so like the people with ADHD like me will be like, oh my God, can you imagine? Wait, can you imagine that's real? Oh my God, is it? And you start Googling a whole bunch of stuff.
And me. That's awesome. Thank you for doing your plug, AR. We are definitely excited about your book. Andrew, you have some questions for our guest tonight?
So like, it's no surprise that we talked a little bit about your book, but in addition to being an author, you're also a podcaster. And, you know, coming from another podcaster myself, you know, I'm kind of curious, what got you started into podcasting?
Well, that's really funny. I got my starting in podcasting in the most like vapid way ever. So I got the idea because I myself, the podcast that I like to listen to was at the time, now don't like, cancel me, was Joe Rogan. I can't say I listen to him now, but when Joe Rogan was talking to like other comedians and not having like a crazy opinion about life and everything, I would love listening to him and just kind of like his, because at the time before he was like, getting into everything else, he would just talk to other comedians about like the process of being a comedian. So I was fascinated about that because I love watching comedy and being at comedy shows and everything related to that. So hearing their point of view of it, what fascinated me. And then the other one was the Monday Morning Podcast by Bill Burr, another comedian. And he treated it in the same way that he would just talk by himself, no guest, about his process, what he was going on. Like, it was almost like the Jerry Seinfeld of podcasting, because he would just talk about the things that actually gave him inspiration for his comedy. He would talk about somebody that annoyed him, what happened to his day, a fight he had with his girlfriend, and that would eventually lead into one of his specials. That's why I love the podcast so much. So when I started writing and I started getting the idea of like, all right, what can I do to market and promote the book and myself, I got this idea that I should just follow in suit with that, right? I should just get on, put a camera on me, get a microphone, and just start talking about my process and whatnot. And I did start doing that. And I think my first 4 or 5 episodes were just me for like an hour and a half to 2 hours, no joke, just talking about whatever, inspiration, what I was doing for art-wise, because the book actually does, another huge selling point I always forget, I actually made all the graphics within this book. So I'm really obsessed with like science, because I do have like an engineering background. So all the technology that I made in the book, I actually made little blueprints for it to see how they would actually, work within life. So for example, the book has about 35 graphics like this in between each chapter that they go in between little scenes of the book, or just outright. There's another example. This is like propaganda for Zako's like Legion, basically. Kind of like a poster you would see if you were actually within the world. But just things like that. So after a while, I realized I kind of was running out of steam. And then I got the idea of talking to other authors. I reached out to some people on Reddit that I found. They reached back to me. We talked for, I'm not kidding, the first like I think 10 or 12 episodes that I had with guests were like 4 hours, because we would just go. We would talk about everything in life, all inspirations. I would just love talking to them, and we would go on forever. And then I started shortening it down, and that's basically where we're at now with like the ART podcast. And I'm loving every minute of it, just because not only do I get to talk with like another creative and just really get to go at it about what I love doing, what they love doing, but it's also just a great progress point, like what I talked about before, that within a couple months, within a year, you look back to the people that you talk to and you're like, wow, yeah, look at the difference of what you've done. You popped out 2 books in this time frame. Wow, that's inspirational. I think that's the type of thing that you need in like this type of like globe and a sphere of like self-publishing. You need to have that constant motivation around you and see like, pay attention to what works with another person, be like, all right, how can I retool that into things that I might want to do, or like, oh, that might work for them, but it doesn't work for me. And just seeing those type of things are just awesome. And it adds to everything, really.
Awesome. It's interesting too, because I had something similar. Like for me, it was a Talk is Jericho podcast. So, I mean, you kind of get where I got Talk is Best from. It's like, it was really interesting for me because Jericho would literally just talk, right? Some episodes it would be just him. Some episodes it would be other guests. It would be either wrestlers. He did everything on that show. I mean, he did like conspiracy theorists episodes. He did wrestlers. He did rock influencers, all that good stuff. And it was really cool and inspiring to me how 2 people who had success in their own worlds just sit down and have a chat. And like, it doesn't matter like, what you guys did in your past. It was more or less just 2 normal people shooting the breeze. And essentially that's what it is. When you're podcasting, you get into that rhythm where you're just talking to another individual who's as passionate about their subject as you are. And they're just trying to make a name for themselves. And podcasting really gives you the opportunity to do that and really get to know the individual. But, it's interesting because there's so many different ways to podcast. The way that I podcast is different from the way that you podcast. You use different equipment than I do. So I'm kind of curious, if you were to give any advice on people getting started with a podcast, what equipment should they use? What what program should they use? What is the easiest way, in your opinion, to start a podcast?
All right. Well, first things first is when you have a podcast, what makes a podcast is a thing called an RSS feed. So you need to find a place that you can basically upload your work onto and derive an RSS feed from it. Because from there, that's where you can put it onto everything you want. That's why a podcast can come out on, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, all at the same time, because there's a thing called an RSS feed. I personally use SoundCloud. It's $16 a month. There are people that use way other functions. I have a website that has its own RSS feed kind of linked into it, so I use SoundCloud as just extra storage, basically. And then I reroute all these things into Spotify. Again, very simple. You just make a Spotify account for your podcast, just copy and paste the RSS link from where you source it, and you get onto it. As far as video recording, StreamYard is great. Honestly, I don't use them, but that's only because I'm honestly kind of lacking. I've been meaning to switch over. I still use Zoom, and I guess I'm just still used to using Zoom and then doing the recording, editing afterwards. But I do want to switch into a live format like this, because everything is you can set it up one time and just have it going and have all these, spiraling things at the bottom, and the background text and that awesome intro and all these things. So I would definitely recommend StreamYard, which I don't even use. So that's a plug, and they don't even pay me. So that double, you should believe me. But yeah, Zoom for starting things off. Zoom is free for the first 40 minutes now, because of course even that they had to put a price barrier on. But you start your little podcast, do 40 minutes of it, and if you want, you can even just send the guest another thing and just edit the two pieces together. Put it up on SoundCloud. They give you a certain gigabytes for free, and you can just do all these trial runs for free. As far as equipment, just get a decent mic from Amazon and a decent camera. Try to go for a 4K if you can. And as everything goes up, you go up. You don't have to go and buy $400 running shoes in order to start doing a 5K. You can do it in vans. So when the need comes for bigger things, you can get bigger things.
Yeah, and another program that I used at first was Anchor, and Anchor was really fun. The only issue with Anchor that I found was that it was only on the phone. It's you can log into your Anchor account on the computer, but I could never get it going to where I would be able to invite another person on stream. I could do a solo stream, but not a two-way stream. That was my only hang-up with Anchor. I mean, it automatically uploads to all those different platforms for you. You don't have to copy any links or whatever. It just automatically publishes to all those servers, which I thought was a plus, and it was free. But for what it was pretty interesting, because essentially you would just be calling somebody and having that podcast that way, and you can have as sophisticated equipment as you needed or as little equipment as you needed, and it worked just fine. It just had those few drawbacks.
You know what? I'm actually going to hit you with a counterattack. I'm actually going to ask you a question because I'm interested. Do you ever get that thing, and then this actually goes to all of you, do you ever get that thing where you're talking to a person and you invite a person on their podcast, and just because they haven't done it before, they think it's the biggest, it's oh my God, no thank you, and I'm just I was hey listen, I'm just me, I'm not Joe Rogan, you know what I'm saying? This isn't crazy, it's just a small, we're just talking, that's all that is. You ever get that thing that people get up? It's oh, I don't know what I can do. I mean, should I have makeup? Is there going to be camera? I'm going to be so nervous. We're just talking. We're just talking. You don't have to have headphones like me, because I've had that too, where people go oh, they have to buy a whole setup like you do. It's nah. You can have this thing on your phone. You can put your your earplugs on. You can do whatever you want. There's no limitation here. It's very easy.
I think a huge reason for that is just a lack of independent content creators when it comes to these podcasts. And it's really odd, because it's before I actually sat down with you were the first person that I had actually sat through a live interview that wasn't One True Promotion. It's so hard, for whatever reason, for independent authors and other content creators to find these independent podcasts to kind of promote themselves on. So I feel like when they actually do find somebody, it's like a diamond in the rough. And that's why they have that projection where it's like, oh my God, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? How hard is it? Can you give me some tips so that I give you, because they want to put on as good as a show as you want to put on, because they want to be invited back,
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And like, honestly, I just treat so much of the interview like that. Like, I always get that question of like, oh, can I get like questions beforehand or like a whole setup? I never treat it like that. I always treat it like, well, I always tell people in messages, it's like, imagine this is just a virtual talk, but just in your head, right? In your head canon, just pretend that we're at a bar or a coffee shop, whatever your preference, and we're just having a chat about whatever it is that you do with writing, with creativity, whatever it is. That's all. Very simple. And just that in itself, people, you don't have to be a good talker to be able to talk about the things that you like. Even the most shy person, you get them like, you get them talking about something they like, that you'll have to get like, a plug to get them to stop.
Yeah.
That just happens with humans. When you get really passionate, you just start talking.
Absolutely. So, with that in mind, I got to ask you, what is the significance of podcasting today, and how does that apply to today's creative market?
I would say podcasting has definitely grown in a sense that, when I watch comedy now, one of like the biggest jokes that they have now is that like it's like the idea that like they'll be like, a person will say like, oh, I have a podcast, and everyone like rolls their eyes, because it's a thing that like everyone has podcasts now. Depending on what the podcast does is very different. I don't know that many book related podcasts. I mean, but there are. I probably off the top of my head, I know at least like 10 or 15. But whatever it is, like murder mystery, crime solving podcasts that talk about music, podcasts that talk about other podcasts. I mean, it's full meta as far as everything goes. So what I think podcasting is just the audible version of like what YouTubers do and like kind of like what influencers do, where they just talk about their opinions, talk about whatever it is, but audible. So you can do it as you're, driving, as you're working and doing other things. And just with how the radio works, I mean, I don't think there's really radio in the typical sense. So I think what podcasting have essentially done is replace the radio personalities of, before in past decades. So before you would have to go to satellite radio in order to talk to whoever. Now you can go on Spotify, pick your podcast, and you can just start listening.
And you mentioned it really early. Guys like Joe Rogan, for good or for bad, right? Joe Rogan was one of those people who kind of pioneered the podcasting industry with, the importance of things like Spotify and other platforms. I mean, whenever you talk about people who get into podcasting, most people at least mention Joe Rogan as an inspiration as to like, hey, look, I saw Joe Rogan do it. It didn't look that hard. That's how he got into it. And I like how you mentioned how radio shows are more or less transferring to podcasts. The Burt Show is another good example. It's another show that I watch out of Atlanta, and it's all about, comedy, making people laugh. And, they have their radio show that they do in the morning, but all the episodes are uploaded to all the podcasting platforms. And of course they have their after the show podcasts where you have all the added content and all this stuff. And it's like, it's an addition to that radio show. And it's how most people actually find their content. It's like you see part of their podcast played on Facebook, which is how I found them. And it's like, oh, crap, look at these new radio hosts who are doing a podcast. And it's like, now I need to go and find that podcast so I can check out the episode.
Yeah, I mean, one that I love is Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. It's, Conan O'Brien from the Conan O'Brien Show. I'm pretty obvious. He just has a podcast where he just invites like other comedians, other actors, and it's such a stream of consciousness between two people that are just effortlessly funny. And those episodes are great because they're actually edited, so they're about 50 minutes of just laughs instead of the normal podcast I listen to, like, a Joe Rogan thing. It would be like a 3-4 hour thing, and like, half hour of it, it's like an interesting question. You're like, scratching your beard if there is a beard. If not, you're just scratching your chin. And then and about an hour of laughs, and then like half hour of like, what's going on? And then, it's all brought together. But the Conan O'Brien is just a straight 50 minutes. You gotta love it. Podcasting in general is just a very, very interesting thing, because now it's just given so much power. It's almost like what YouTube has done before. You're just giving so much power to content creators, where before you would have to somehow convince a radio station to give you a show, which I don't even know what the process of that is. Now we can just Google, what's the StreamYard account, and like you can get started within a couple days. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Andrew, AR, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I just wanted to jump in real quick just to add to the excellent point you're making. Any like made for TV, regularly scheduled programming, sound bites, broadcasts, they tend to just throw the same message at you over and over and over again. And I found with podcasts, including all the podcasts you mentioned, the beautiful thing about getting somebody uncensored, unfiltered, unrestrained is that you develop such a closer relationship to the two people talking. You feel like you have a more accurate understanding of who they are and where they're coming from. At least I do. And I find that in today's society, where communication can be so stifled in that way, it's actually, I would argue, it's quite essential more and more.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's just like a thing of consumerism too. Well, not consumerism as in like that, but just like the actual just sense of like how we consume content. You look at like actors back in the day that were like popular, and the only thing you knew about those actors were just like what the tabloids would talk about, what they would say at like on Johnny Carson. It was just basically like a persona that they put out there, and that's all you saw. You never actually knew anything about them until they came out with the tell-all memoir, and like they're in their 60s in order to like generate a couple extra like bills and whatnot. But now, so much of our entertainment is based on like the idea of liking a person. Keanu Reeves can drop a movie about anything, and people are going to be there because people love Keanu Reeves. You look at Ezra Miller, right? The guy from Flash. Just the idea of like every Reddit post that I see is people saying it's like, when is this man just going to disappear? Like no one wants to like even hear about this man. So it just has such a bigger effect, I think, now. Just like the idea of like people knowing you more intimately. And like you said, I think that's what podcasts do. It gives you an option to like actually know a person, and not just for what they do creatively, but the things that got them there, the inspirations that brought them to like where they're at, and also just personal things.
Absolutely. And, we talked earlier about how hard it is to contain the podcast, right? Or contain the show, because, you could get talking and talking and talking and talking. And it's like we could spend 4 hours talking to each other, shooting the breeze. Mm-hmm. But, before we know it, the hour's up. And, looking at the clock right now, we're about to hit the happy trail, as I like to call it, and ride off into the sunset. So one thing we do like to do with all of our guests is we like to ask them, is there any way that we can follow you, or, where do we go to find your content, access your content, and support you best?
Well, to support me, there's actually I had the scroll right here, Allegory of the End. It's my Instagram account, so you can go ahead and follow that. But outside of that, really the best thing ever, which is the hub of all things that, from me, the company, the publishing side, everything, is just neotino.net, neotino.net. It has everything. It has the shop. You can get merch. You can get, all these posters and all the blueprints that I talked about. I honestly wish I get like a better camera to actually like show you all the graphics that are like just covering this room. You can get posters, you can get little knickknacks, all these things. You can buy the books. You can buy them in ebook and paperback directly from me, instead of having to like get like, the big corporations behind it and everything. And free short stories, links to the podcast, absolutely everything. And then obviously there's also the links to my socials and YouTube and everything. So neotino.net, neotino.net. I need to make like a little jingle so it gets like, stuck in people's minds when they're trying to like brush their teeth in the morning.
That's amazing. All right.
Well, this has been an amazing interview, guys. Thank you so much to my co-hosts, both of whom did just a fabulous, fabulous job with tonight's discussion. And thank you to our amazing guest, AR. You are such a pro at what you do. You're always great to have on a live stream because this is simply what you do, whether you're the host or the guest. This is a fun conversation between four live streamers, podcasters. I got to say, it all flowed pretty naturally. So it has been an absolute pleasure to have you. We do hope that you will return. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time. Yeah, especially like the little like disco music and the I honestly wish like that you had like my camera going just for the blooper reel. I was out here actually being like, "Hey, what's up, man?" I had my glow sticks. I was doing the whole thing. I was out here.
Try to make it peppy, you know.
That's right. Maybe StreamYard will see the need for outtakes and make that possible in the future. But for now, we're just going to say thank you for dropping by. We look forward to talking to you again. And we, of course, look forward to supporting you and collaborating with you in the future. Thank you very much for coming on tonight, my friend.
Thank you. And again, Allegory of the End, Volume 1, out now. Pick it up.
Amazing. Pick it up, people. Pick it up. Again, I am Alec, Director of Broadcasting at OTP.
And Andrew Bash, Chief Operating Officer.
And Nick, Arts and Media Director at OTP.
And we hope.
And I'm AR.
And you are AR. The man himself. Thank you again. We hope this episode left you invigorated to read some sci-fi books and to maybe get into some more podcasts.
Go watch Prey.
And go watch Prey. Great movie.
I'm gonna.
It's
subject.
Amazing.
That is the subject for the next podcast. It is amazing. It's very, very good. We are going to close out tonight with some new commercials and promos for OTP. We will see you next week with our next guest. AR, thank you again. You have a fabulous evening, my friend.
Likewise. Peace out, folks.